Hey guys, it's Kimberly from the Fact Quarter Shop, and Annie from By Annie is going to show us how to make her on-the-town bag. So tell me a little bit about your bag.
This is a really fun, easy bag to make, and I love it because there's no quilting in it. You just use Soft and Stable. You can see how the Soft and Stable really makes it stand up and hold its shape. We're going to use some stitch and seam for the center to give it some texture in the middle, which really gives it some interest. We've got some fun wooden handles on it. It's got pockets on the inside. It's just a really easy bag to take on the down.
Yeah, and I think it's really beginner friendly because there's no quilting in it. And so this is really great if you just want to try out a bag. This could be a good first bag. And then she wanted to show you, this is what it looks like if you don't use Soft and Stable. So you definitely want to use Soft and Stable. So let's get started.
All right, Kimberly, I want to show you how fun it is to create texture on fabric and how easy it is using fabric that shrinks. So we're going to create the textured fabric that makes the center panel on this bag. And when I get ready to do this, I usually try out some different options to decide what I want to do. And I've done some little samples here to show you the different effects that you can get by stitching close together or far apart. So this one I stitched in a grid with lines about 1/2 inch apart. This is lines 3/4 inch apart, 1 inch apart, and 1.5 inch apart. So you can see that I get a lot more tight texture when I stitch closer together. But all of those started as 5-inch squares. They all ended as 4-inch squares. So they all basically shrunk the same amount. The tighter stitching gives you more texture, but it doesn't use more fabric. So that's kind of important to know, that when you start with the size in the pattern, it doesn't really matter how you stitch it. You're going to end up with enough fabric when you're finished. So the product that I used to create this is called Bosol's Stitch and Steam, and it's a fabric that shrinks about 25 to 30% in every direction. So you're going to sew it to the fabric that you want to texturize, and when you steam it and it shrinks, it takes whatever you sewed to it with it. One thing that I love to do on these is to stitch decorative stitches, long rows of those, and that gives you a really fun effect. But on this one, I set my machine on a serpentine stitch, and almost everybody has that on their machine, and they've never used it because they don't know what to use it for. But it does zigzags, but it stitches everywhere. And doing those wavy lines in there gives you a really beautiful texture. And I don't measure, I may mark one line down the center so I get going straight, and then I just use my foot as a guide. So I just stitch all the way across the piece, both sides, and then we're going to steam it.
Yeah, and I think that it's good for beginners because it doesn't have to be exact. Once it shrinks up, you're not going to see it. And I like that you can add your own little personal flair. You know, if you want just a little bit or a lot, you can really have fun with this part. And I think this is the part that really gives the bag the unique touch.
Yes. So you can stitch this from the front, or if you want to stitch from the back, you can do that too. It doesn't really matter which way you do it. So if you want to mark lines and get real specific, just mark on your stitch and seam the lines, and then you can stitch from this side. It's going to be hidden inside your project. You don't even have to worry about removing them. Once you've got it all stitched together, and it's really important that you stitch it before you steam it. If you try steaming the stitch and seam without something sewn to it, all you have is a smaller piece of stitch and seam. You don't have any texture because it's sewing it to the fabric that creates the texture. So don't forget to do that step first. So stitch them, then you're ready to steam. Now, if you're using a regular iron, you're probably going to want to steam it from the fabric side because you really don't want to touch the stitch and seam with a hot iron. It's not going to melt. It's made out of 100% polyester. It's not going to stick to your iron, but I've noticed that sometimes it gets a little bit stiff. So and it sounds a little bit crackly too. So I like to stitch it either from my fabric side, or if I'm using this awesome reliable iron that gives me amazing steam on the lowest heat setting, I just set it on 1, turn on my steam, and it works great. I prefer to do it from the back side because then I'm not flattening my texture on the front so much. So we're going to flip it over, and we're just going to put our iron on high steam, and we're going to put it right in the middle, and notice what happens. Right away, we've got texture being created. And we're going to keep steaming this until everything is flat again. So our stitch and seam starts out one size, it shrinks down to another size, and because it shrinks evenly in all directions, we should have a perfectly flat piece again when we're done. So we're just going to keep steaming everything nice and flat. And all the patterns that use this are written so that the size is taken into consideration. So when you start with the bigger piece, you know you're going to end up. So again, we've got a flat piece. We're going to turn our steam off, flip that over, and look how easy that was.
And it's so awesome. I mean, I could do that.
You could do that. You could have a whole lot of fun playing with that.
Yeah. It was definitely scary when you put the iron and it shrunk up, but that was pretty cool.
Yeah. The other thing that you can do is if you add a layer of batting in between your stitch and seam and your fabric, when you stitch it, you get even more texture. It puffs it up, fills it beautifully, and I like to use wool batting for that because it really gives you a wonderful, beautiful effect. So lots of fun things you can do with that. So we're going to take this and cut it and get ready to assemble our bag.
Okay.
We've got our fabric texturized for our center panel, and now we're ready to cut out that piece. And in the pattern, you've got full-size templates for everything. I like to make one that has both sides on it. This is just half of the template, so I like to do it with template plastic, and I just lay my plastic on top of my pattern, trace around it, flip it over, do the other side, and then I've got a full-size template. So I can line it up on here, get it nice and even, and then it's going to be just like cutting any kind of fabric. I'm going to use my rotary cutter ruler, and line things up. So I'm going to take my ruler and line it up even with the edges of my template, and then I'll just cut right along the edge just like I was cutting fabric. You want to make sure you're not cutting your template away, so get it beyond there, and then it's just a matter of slicing it, and we've got it cut. No different than cutting a piece of fabric. We'll go all the way around, get our center panel cut out, and then we're ready to start putting our bag together.